Okay, let's dive into this one. Asiatyrannus. I mean, just the name alone, right? Asian tyrant kind of grabs you.
It really does, and it sounds like this new discovery from China definitely earns that name.
So what are we working with here? What's the main source for this deep dive?
Yeah, so our focus is mostly on the main paper. It's Zheng et al., published in 2024. That's the one that officially describes Asiatyrannus as a new genus and species.
Got it. So the mission today is really to unpack that paper, figure out what this new Tyrannosaur is all about and what it adds to the picture of, well, late dinosaur evolution in Asia.
Exactly. We want to understand its place, what makes it special, and what it tells us about that whole ecosystem just before the end.
All right, let's start at the beginning then. The discovery itself. Where and when did Asiatyrannus first turn up?
Okay, so the story starts back in September 2017. The fossil was found in the Nangshan Formation, that's near Shahe Town, Nankang District, basically Gansu City in Jiangxi Province, China.
Southeastern China. And timeline-wise?
We're talking late Cretaceous, right at the end, the Maastrichtian Age. So, yeah, very end of the dinosaurs' reign.
Okay, prime time, prime location. What did they actually find? Was it like a complete skeleton?
Not complete, but pretty
Ooh.
significant. They got most of a skull, and the really cool part is that it was mostly articulated.
Meaning the bones were still joined up?
Yeah, exactly. Still connected how they were in life, which gives us a much, much better idea of its shape. They also found bits and pieces from the body, parts of both legs, several tail vertebrae, disarticulated, but still valuable stuff.
So, enough to work with, clearly. And it took a few years from finding it in 2017 to the official publication in 2024. That seems pretty standard for this kind of work.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Cleaning, preparing, analyzing, comparing. It all takes time. The publication of scientific reports was the culmination of all that careful work.
Now, the name again, Asiatyrannus, Asian tyrant. Makes sense. But the second part, Zuri, is there a story there?
There is, and it's a nice one. Asiatyrannus, like you said, is Asia plus the Latinized Greek Tyrannus for tyrants or king.
Hmm.
Pretty standard.
Mm-hmm.
But Zeus specifically honors Zhu Jing. He's a really prominent paleontologist who's done incredible work on Chinese dinosaurs.
Ah, okay. So it's a tribute. That's great.
Yeah, a well-deserved nod to his contributions, definitely.
All right, let's get a visual. How big was this Asian tyrant? Are we talking T-Rex scale or?
No, much smaller than that. It's considered small to medium-sized for Tyrannosaur. The skull they found, nearly complete, is about 47.5 centimeters.
Okay, so what's that, roughly 19 inches?
Yeah, just under. And based on that and the other bones, they estimate that the total body length was probably around 3.5 to 4 meters.
11 to 13 feet. Okay, so bigger than a person, but not the colossal size of its most famous cousin.
Exactly. More like a large predator we might see today, in terms of length at least.
How does that compare to other tyrannosaurs? Maybe ones that lived alongside or ones it's closely related to?
Good question. Well, if you look at Nanotaurus, that's the Arctic Tyrannosaurian from North America, its estimated adult skull was probably bigger, maybe 60, 70 centimeters.
Right.
Though it's worth noting there's still some debate about how big Nanosaurus actually got as an adult. Some researchers think it might have been closer in size to Albertosaurus.
Okay, so Asiatyrannus seems generally smaller than its potential close relative in North America. What about dinosaurs in the same neighborhood? You mentioned the Nangshan Formation. Wasn't there another Tyrannosaur found there?
Yes, Kinosaurus. And that's where it gets really interesting. Asiatyrannus was significantly smaller, maybe about half the length of the known Kinosaurus specimen.
That's the length. Wow.
Yeah, but maybe even more striking is the skull difference. Asiatyrannus has this deep, robust snout. Suggests a pretty powerful bite. Whereas Kinosaurus is famous for its very long, slender, almost delicate snout. Completely different head shape.
So living side by side, but built completely differently, especially the business end. Does that suggest they weren't, like, fighting over the same food?
That's exactly the implication. Those different skull shapes probably mean they had different hunting styles, maybe targeted different prey. It's a classic case of potential niche partitioning, allowing them to coexist.
Makes sense. And was the Asiatyrannus specimen they found fully grown?
The analysis suggests it wasn't quite an adult, no, but it was likely past its fastest growth stage. What's interesting is that other young tyrannosaurines at a similar developmental stage tend to be larger.
Ah, so that reinforces the idea that Asiatyrannus was just genuinely a smaller kind of tyrannosaurian overall, not just a juvenile of something bigger.
Precisely. It seems to have occupied a smaller size class within that group.
Okay, this is fascinating. We've got the when, where, the size, the distinct features. Let's zoom out now to the family tree. Where does Asiatyrannus slot into the bigger picture of Tyrannosaur evolution?
Right, the classification. The phylogenetic analysis in the paper, which basically compares lots of anatomical features, places Asiatyrannus squarely within the Tyrannosauridae family. No surprises there.
And more specifically,
More specifically, within Tyrannosaurina.
yeah.
That's the group containing the more derived or evolutionarily advanced tyrannosaurs, including T-Rex itself.
So it's not an early offshoot, it's part of that later, more specialized group. And didn't the paper mention a particularly close link to a North American dinosaur?
Yes, that's one of the key findings. The analysis suggests it forms a polytomy with Nanosaurus, the one from Alaska we mentioned earlier.
Polytomy. Sounds technical. What does that mean in simple terms?
It basically means they're very closely related, like siblings or first cousins on the family tree, but the current data doesn't let us say for sure exactly how they branched off relative to each other. Imagine a fork in the road splitting into 3 paths at once instead of just 2. That's kind of like a polytomy on an evolutionary tree.
So, super close relatives, possibly sharing a recent common ancestor, but the exact branching order isn't resolved yet. That connection across continents is interesting in itself, right? Late Cretaceous.
It really is. It could point to dispersal events, maybe Tyrannosaurians moving between Asia and North America relatively late in the game, or perhaps an older ancestor that spread out and then diversified in both places. We need more fossils to pin down that story.
Okay. The paper includes one of those branching diagrams, a cladogram. Can you sort of walk us through where Asiatyrannus fits visually on that tree?
Sure. So imagine the base of the tree has the earlier tyrannosaurids, things like Albertosaurus, Gorgosaurus. As you move up towards the present, well, the end of the Cretaceous, you get to the Tyrannosaurinae branch.
Right.
Within that, you see some early branches like Nanotyrannus, then the Alieramus species and Kansasaurus branching off. Then a bit further up, you get a cluster with Lithrinax and Teratophonius, and then branching off together in that unresolved polytomy are Asiatyrannus and Nanosaurus.
Okay, so near the top, but not quite at the absolute final branches.
Exactly. Above them, you find the real giants. Daspletosaurus, Zuchingtyrannus from China, Tarbosaurus from Asia, and the ultimate endpoint, Tyrannosaurus rex. So Asiatyrannus and Manosaurus are up there with the derived group, but represent a slightly earlier divergence point than the absolute largest forms.
That really helps place it. And the paper highlights something significant about its size again here, doesn't it, in relation to its position?
It does. It points out that Asiatyrannus might be the only known Tyrannosaurian, that specific advanced subgroup, in this smaller size class. Most other Tyrannosaurians we know are considerably larger.
Huh. So that suggests maybe there was more variety in size and ecological roles within even the advanced Tyrannosaurs than we thought.
Potentially, yes. Perhaps smaller body size was advantageous or filled a specific niche in certain ecosystems like late Cretaceous China.
Which brings us neatly to that ecosystem. Let's paint a picture of the Nangshan Formation back then. What was life like for Asiatyrannus? Who else was around?
It sounds like a pretty busy place. We already mentioned its neighbor, the slender-snouted Tyrannosaur Kionsasaurus. Right. But get this. They've also found isolated large teeth that suggest there might have been a third, even larger, unnamed tyrannosaurid roaming around too.
Wow, hold on. 3 different types of Tyrannosaurs potentially living in the same place at the same time? How does that even work?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Right.
It strongly implies resource partitioning, different sizes, different skull shapes. They must have been hunting different things or in different ways to avoid stepping on each other's toes too much.
Fascinating. What else lived there? Any other theropods?
Oh, yes. The paper mentions the Rhizonosaurids, those strange, long-clawed herbivores or omnivores like Nanchaguncosaurus, and a real explosion of oviraptorids.
The feathered, beaked ones?
Yep, the list is long. Banji, Corythoraptor, Githunzosaurus, Honansaurus, Janxosaurus, Nankangia, Shixingia, Tungshinlong. It seems like a major hotspot for oviraptor diversity. Like you said earlier, maybe a giant feathery party.
Incredible diversity. Any big plant eaters for these predators? Sauropods?
Definitely. They found some faufelin sauropods there, specifically Ganonsaurus and Zhangjiatan. So yes, there were large herbivores on the menu potentially.
And it wasn't just dinosaurs, right?
No, the whole ecosystem is represented. Crocodilians like Janchisuchus, lizards Kangxia and Tanyosaurus, and turtles like Janxichles, a really rich picture of life at the very end of the Mesozoic.
It sounds like a remarkably complete snapshot. The paper compared it to another famous fossil site, too.
It did, yeah. It draws parallels with the Nemegt Formation in Mongolia. That's famous for Carbosaurus, the big Asian tyrannosaurian, but also these slender Asiatyrannus species and other smaller predators like Bugarasman.
So similar patterns of large and small predators coexisting in different parts of Asia around the same time.
Exactly. It suggests maybe similar ecological structures or pressures were shaping these dinosaur communities across the continent during the late Cretaceous.
All right, let's pull it all together then. We've covered a lot of ground on Asiatyrannus. What are the main takeaways? Why is this discovery so important?
I think the key things are, one, the discovery itself. We now have this small to medium, deep-snouted tyrannosaurian Asiatyrannus right from the end of the Cretaceous in China. That's new.
Okay.
Two, its close relationship with North America's Nanosaurus. That link, even if the exact branching is fuzzy,
Right.
tells us something about how these animals were related and maybe moved across the continents.
Right, the biogeography aspect.
Yeah. And three, what it tells us about the Nangshan ecosystem, the fact that it lived alongside Kensosaurus and maybe even a third giant tyrannosaur, plus all those oviraptorids and other dinosaurs. It just paints a picture of incredible diversity and complex interactions right before the extinction event.
It definitely adds another layer to our understanding of Tyrannosaur variety and their global distribution, a really significant find.
Absolutely. It's another piece showing us just how dynamic and varied life was during the final stages of the age of dinosaurs.
So, a final thought, perhaps, for you listening.
Yeah, it's something to ponder. We had this smaller Tyrannosaurian, Asiatyrannus, living in an environment with potentially much larger predators. What kind of ecological role do you think it carved out for itself? Was that deep snout for tackling specific prey the others ignored? Does finding Asiatyrannus hint that maybe these smaller tyrannosaurines were actually more common or diverse, especially in Asia, than our current fossil record shows?
Good questions.
And, what else might be waiting in those late Cretaceous rocks in China? What future discoveries could completely change our view of how these tyrant lizards evolved and lived? It really makes you think about how connected everything was, these ancient worlds, and how much we still have to learn.